Thanksgiving at our house had always been loud. Not warm, not loving, just loud. 14 people filled the dining room that night. Cousins, neighbors, my dad's old golf buddies, even my sister Emily's fiancé. The chandelier cast a golden glow over the table, making everything look picture perfect. The turkey glazed and proud at the center, bowls of mashed potatoes smothered in butter, cranberry sauce trembling in crystal dishes. From the outside, it looked like success. My father loved appearances. Emily sat to his right, glowing in a cream sweater, her engagement ring catching the light every time she lifted her glass. She had just finished her residency. A doctor. The pride of the family. The story my father told everyone. And then there was me. I sat near the end of the table, beside the kitchen door, still smelling faintly of lemon cleaner from the morning shift I had worked before coming over to help Mom cook. My hands were dry from washing dishes, my nails short, practical. Dad stood up to give his annual Thanksgiving toast, tapping his fork against his wine glass. The room quieted. "You know," he began, smiling wide, chest puffed, "this year I'm especially thankful." He rested his hand on Emily's shoulder. "One daughter is a doctor," he said proudly, his voice echoing just enough to fill every corner of the room. Applause broke out immediately. Emily flushed, embarrassed but smiling. Someone whistled. My aunt dabbed her eyes. Dad paused for effect. "And the other one," he continued, turning his head slowly toward me, "is a maid." Laughter. Not cruel laughter. Not roaring. Just enough. Just loud enough to feel like a slap. He chuckled as if it were a harmless joke. "Guess we covered both ends of the service industry, huh?" A few people laughed harder. My throat tightened, but I forced a small smile. I had learned how to do that years ago. Smile when it stings. Smile when it burns. Smile so no one asks questions. Emily shifted in her chair. I saw the way her hand tightened around her glass. Mom, ever the peacekeeper, quickly stood up. "Well," she said too brightly, "we're proud of both our girls. Emily has worked so hard. Medical school, residency, it's been such a journey." She raised her glass toward my sister again. "To Dr. Emily!" More applause. I looked down at my plate. The turkey blurred. My ears rang. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't have hurt so much if it were the first time, but it was every time. Every birthday, every graduation, every family gathering. Titles mattered in our house. Paychecks mattered. Prestige mattered. I mattered when I was useful. The smell of sage and roasted garlic filled my lungs, but I couldn't taste anything. My hands rested in my lap. Steady. Too steady. Dad sat back down, satisfied with himself. "It's all in good fun," he added, waving his hand dismissively, as if he had just told the cleverest joke of the night. Good fun. 14 people sat at that table. 14 witnesses. 14 sets of eyes that now knew exactly where I stood in my father's ranking system. Near the kitchen. Near the door. Closest to the place where I belonged. Mom kept talking about Emily's upcoming job offer at a prestigious hospital. My aunt leaned over to ask about wedding dates. Someone poured more wine. The laughter resumed. The noise returned. But something inside me had gone very, very quiet. I felt it settle in my chest. Not anger, not exactly. Not even sadness. Clarity. I looked at my sister. She avoided my eyes. I looked at my father. He was carving turkey, already moving on, already forgetting what he had just done. Maybe he thought I would move on too. Maybe he thought I would stay quiet, like always. Mom lifted her glass again. "And Emily, sweetheart, we couldn't be more proud." That's when I pushed my chair back. Slowly. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound cutting through the conversation like a blade. 14 heads turned. I stood up, not shaking, not crying, just steady. "If we're comparing daughters tonight," I said calmly, my voice carrying farther than I expected, "maybe we should compare the whole story." The room went silent, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sitting near the kitchen door. I was standing at the head of the table. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the soft ticking of the wall clock above the china cabinet. 14 faces stared at me, confused, curious, uncomfortable. My father let out a short laugh. "Oh, come on," he said, waving his carving knife slightly before setting it down. "It was a joke." "I know," I replied gently. "That's what makes it easier to say what I'm about to say." My hands rested against the back of my chair. I didn't feel nervous anymore, just tired, tired of shrinking. "You're right, Dad," I continued. "Emily is a doctor. She worked incredibly hard to become one. She studied while everyone else slept. She pushed through exams, rotations, long nights at the hospital. She deserves every bit of respect she gets." Emily's eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe. "But since we're sharing accomplishments," I said, turning slowly to look around the table, "let's share all of them." My father's jaw tightened. "This isn't necessary." "It is," I said calmly, "because titles only tell part of the story." I looked at my aunt first, then at Dad's friends, making sure they heard every word. "When Dad lost his job 5 years ago," I began, "someone had to make sure the mortgage got paid." My father shifted in his seat. "That was temporary." "It was 8 months," I corrected gently. 8 months of late notices and phone calls. No one laughed now. "I had just finished my first year of college," I continued. "I was studying business management. I liked it. I had plans." I paused, letting that settle. "But tuition isn't flexible, and bills aren't patient, so I left." Mom covered her mouth. "I took the first full-time job I could find, cleaning offices at night, houses on weekends, hotels during the holidays. I told everyone it was temporary." I smiled faintly. 5 years later, I'm still cleaning. My father looked down at his plate. "When Emily got into medical school," I said softly, turning to my sister, "we were all so proud, and we should have been. But med school isn't cheap." Emily's lips trembled. "You don't have to—" "I want to," I assured her. "I picked up extra shifts," I continued. "I cleaned 3 houses before sunrise and 2 after dinner. I sent money when textbooks cost more than expected. I paid the utility bill when Dad couldn't. I covered Mom's deductible when she needed surgery." Mom began to cry quietly. "I didn't say anything," I added, "because that's what family does. We step in when someone needs help." I let my gaze rest on my father. "I wasn't embarrassed to clean," I said. "I still am not. It's honest work. It pays my bills. It paid some of yours too." A heavy silence wrapped around the table. "One daughter is a doctor," I repeated softly. "The other one is a maid." I nodded slowly. "Yes, I clean floors, I scrub bathrooms, I wipe down counters." Then I lifted my chin slightly. "But I also kept this family standing when it was about to fall." My father inhaled sharply. "That's dramatic," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's not dramatic," I said gently. "It's just the part that doesn't fit neatly into a toast." I looked around at the guests again. Being a maid isn't a punchline. It's how I made sure the lights stayed on in this house. My hands were steady. "I didn't give up college because I couldn't handle it," I said quietly. "I gave it up because someone had to." Emily pushed her chair back slightly, tears sliding down her cheeks now. "I never asked you to do that," she whispered. "I know," I said. "You didn't, and I'd do it again." I faced my father one last time. "If we're measuring success tonight," I said, my voice calm but firm, "then let's measure everything, not just the titles that sound impressive after a glass of wine." The room felt different now, smaller, honest, and for the first time, I saw something in my father's expression I had never seen before. Not anger, not pride, uncertainty. After the silence stretched for a few seconds too long, I took a steadying breath. The faces around me weren't just quiet anymore. They were shifting, leaning in, listening. I felt the weight of every gaze, the kind that pierces deeper than any insult, deeper than any laugh. I know what you're thinking, I said softly, letting my words fill the space. You're thinking that cleaning floors, washing dishes, making beds, it's not glamorous, that it's not a real success, that it doesn't compare to saving lives or wearing a white coat. I looked at Emily. And you're right. Being a doctor saves lives every day. You saved people I've never met. You've done incredible things. I let that hang in the air so she could feel it, because she deserved to feel it. But then I looked back at the room, at the people who had been laughing just minutes ago. But success isn't only measured in prestige. It isn't only measured in recognition. Sometimes it's measured in survival, in resilience, in who stood when everything around them was falling apart. I straightened my shoulders. I didn't just clean. I didn't just work jobs that most people looked down on. I built something. Slowly. Painfully. Every shift, every penny saved, every moment spent sacrificing for this family, that became my foundation. I started a small cleaning business. I employ single mothers. I pay my debts. I'm stable. I'm independent. And I'm proud. Some heads were nodding. Others just stared. My father's jaw tightened, but I could see the small flicker of surprise in his eyes. Maybe he had never thought of me like this. Maybe he had never thought of me at all. Emily's hand trembled on the table. I never realized, she whispered. You never had to, I said softly. Because I wasn't doing it for recognition. I was doing it because someone had to. And yes, it hurt every time Dad made jokes at my expense. Every time someone called me just a maid. Every time someone assumed I wasn't enough. But that pain, it made me stronger. It made me relentless. The room had gone completely silent. Mom's hands were trembling and she pressed them to her mouth. My father avoided my eyes, and my aunt's gaze was sharp and guilty. And here's the truth, I continued, my voice steady now, filled with the quiet confidence I had earned over years of work and struggle. Being a doctor is impressive, but being a maid in this family saved lives too. Maybe not the ones in the hospital, but the ones at home. The ones who needed food on the table, a roof over their heads, a little stability when everything else was chaos. I saved this family. I took a breath and let it out slowly. And I did it without complaint, without applause, without asking anyone to notice. I did it because I loved this family, and because I believed that love mattered more than status. Emily reached for my hand, tears falling freely now. I should have said something. I should have helped more. You did, I told her. You did what you were able to do, and that's enough. I turned back to my father. And you? Maybe you finally see that success isn't something you measure in titles or jokes. It's something you feel, in actions, in sacrifices, in the quiet moments nobody else notices. He swallowed, tight-lipped, his face flushing with the weight of his own conscience. I could see the guilt building, the recognition that he had underestimated me all these years. And so, Dad, I said, voice calm but piercing. If we're making comparisons tonight, let's be honest. Let's look beyond the surface. Let's see the real impact, the real strength, the real sacrifice. I paused, letting the silence settle like dust in sunlight. And then, I added softly with just a hint of quiet triumph. You'll understand that the maid you joked about was the one who quietly held everything together while the rest of the world looked elsewhere. The room didn't cheer. No one clapped, but the weight shifted, the air changed. And in that moment, I knew something had finally broken. Not me, not my spirit, but the illusion my father had held over the family for years. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer a joke. I was finally seen. The tension in the room was heavy, but it no longer pressed down on me. I felt a strange calm settle over my chest, like the quiet after a storm, when everything is raw but honest. My father sat there, silent, staring at his hands on the table, as if for the first time he was noticing the lines, the scars, the work that had been done without recognition. Mom's shoulders shook as she wiped at her tears with a napkin, unable to speak. Emily squeezed my hand, her eyes wet, trembling with emotion. I took a breath and spoke slowly, deliberately, choosing each word like bricks in a wall I was building, not to trap, but to reveal. "I'm not standing here to humiliate anyone," I said. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth." The room shifted in response. Some of the guests leaned forward, suddenly aware that they had been spectators to a private humiliation, witnessing something they hadn't understood. "I want everyone to see what's been happening behind the scenes," I continued. "Who paid the bills when the house was falling apart? Who sacrificed dreams to make sure this family stayed afloat? Who spent nights cleaning, scrubbing, and working multiple jobs so that the rest of us could sleep?" I let my gaze sweep the table slowly. That daughter was me. I could see my father's face pale and tight, and I knew he understood. He always had. He just refused to acknowledge it. "I never asked for applause," I said softly, "because I don't need it. But I do need to be seen. I need this family to understand that love and sacrifice aren't measured by titles or prestige." I let that hang in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Silence followed. Not the awkward silence of embarrassment, but the quiet that comes from truth settling into hearts. "Emily saved lives at the hospital," I said, turning slightly to my sister. "And that's incredible. I am proud of you, more than I can ever say. But saving a family isn't less important. It just doesn't have a white coat to wear." I straightened, letting my voice gain strength. "So tonight, Dad, when you toast your daughters, I want you to remember this. You don't measure us by jobs or paychecks or status. You measure us by love, by who shows up, by who stands when it's hard, by who keeps giving even when no one notices." I paused. The room felt still, as if every person there was holding their breath, processing. Mom reached across the table and took my hand, her grip shaking. "I am proud of both of you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Both of you, in your own ways, have given everything." Emily leaned into me, hugging my shoulder tightly. "I didn't see," she whispered, "all that you did." "You did enough," I told her. "Just by being you, that's enough." And then finally, I looked at Dad. His eyes were glossy, full of something I couldn't name: regret, humility, perhaps even a dawning admiration. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There were no words sufficient. There never had been. "I won't insult you," I said, softening my voice, "because it's not about shaming anyone. It's about showing the truth. And the truth is this: I was never just a maid. I was the one who held everything together, and now, maybe, you can see it." A few moments passed. Then slowly, Dad reached out and took my hand, a quiet gesture that carried years of unspoken acknowledgement. I didn't realize," he admitted, his voice small. I never understood." "It's okay," I said, squeezing his hand back. "Now you do." The guests, previously uncomfortable, began to nod, some murmuring quietly. They understood, even if only partially, that they had witnessed something far bigger than a simple toast. They had seen a daughter reclaim her dignity. I sat down slowly, finally feeling the tension lift. I looked at my family, and for the first time, I felt pride. Not in a job, not in a title, but in being recognized for everything I truly was. That night, the table was quiet, but it wasn't tense. It was full of understanding, full of love, full of respect. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer the maid. I was the daughter who had cleaned up the truth, held her family together, and finally let them see her for who she really was. And somehow, that felt sweeter than any applause could ever be.